Thank you so much, everyone. I think we should start with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for this opportunity to share, for the people who have come to hear. And I pray that it may be your words and a blessing to any who are struggling with this, or know anyone who is struggling with these things. I thank you. I give you glory and honor in Jesus' most holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So I am so thankful to all of you in advance for your grace in being very patient with me. I am not very good with technology, and this is the first time that I'm doing something like this. So please bear with me. uh, we're going to go ahead and begin. Our our title for today is Helping Our Children to Recover from Mental Illness. Now, I do wish that I could remove some of the windows here. I'm not sure. I don't, where I see myself, I see you, Mark, and then I see someone else. Is there a way to?
Yeah, so on top of those windows, there's a flat bar, and then a one square, and then two squares, then multiple. If you don't want to see anything, hit the little flat bar.
Little flat bar.
Or if you just want to see your, uh,
Oh,
know,
I see. I see what you mean.
mhm.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just gonna go ahead and hide everything right now. Perfect. That way I will be able to go through the material better.
Yeah.
So I was really impressed to share this topic with you as I was going on my daily devotional walks. And and I was listening to The Desire of Ages, chapter 47. This is a topic that is very near and dear to me because I know what it's like to have to deal with a child who is and had to struggle with severe mental illness. And I have in in the span of time and through my experience and seeing how God was so good and having shared some of the victory that God has given, lots of people have had so many questions, and in sharing my experience, I'm just seeing so many others that are suffering with this, and that is what has really encouraged me to put this together and share it with you. And so I'll share a few stories with you of others that have reached out to me with their own personal struggles of their children. And of course, I've changed some of these stories that, I'll share for the sake of protecting the individuals and their privacy. The details have been changed, but the stories are very real, very true. And for the sake of time, I have only included very few stories. But as you'll see, Nina, um, these are stories that you may have heard of something like this, or you may have a child who's experienced something like this. And I really hope that this is helpful to you. Now, when I say helping our children, it really is that um, we don't really have the power to change things, um, but we do have the power to help our children. they are their own individuals. And I do want to stress that as we go through this. Another thing I would like to stress, obviously, is that anything that I share is experience, it's information, and I hope that you take it and take it further and further and do share it. But it is not meant to obviously be any kind of medical advice or it is simply just sharing for the sake of wanting others to know. And I will be sharing information that comes from the perspective of professionals that deal in this field. That does not mean that I agree with everything, and but it does cover some of that so that you can see and understand things from that perspective. You will need to in order to navigate some of these things. Okay, so our first story today is going to be Stephen. Stephen is a 24-year-old young man who grew up in the church. Although he had been living on his own since he was 18, he's had to come back home due to developing worsening delusions and psychosis. After a long hospitalization, Stephen has been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. His prognosis is not good, and psychiatrists tell his mother that Stephen will live with lifelong cognitive and physical disabilities due to his disease progression and medication side effects. Stephen was a professional athlete, but today he struggles with basic activities of daily living, such as walking, eating, or brushing his teeth. He moves in slow motion, drools, has tremors, and requires supervision and assistance for everything. Now we're going to talk about Jack. Jack is 28 years old. He's a pharmacist. His mother has been concerned for many months due to Jack's increasing concerns over food and long fasting periods. One day, his mother received a call that Jack had been found completely undressed and confused on a cold winter day. The diagnosis was schizophrenia. After many months of various medication treatments in the hospital and no resolution to the delusions that led him to refuse food, he was further diagnosed with treatment-resistant schizophrenia. He was placed on a feeding tube in an effort to save his life. Now, Ella. Ella is 15. She was bright and bubbly as a little girl, but lately she has been avoiding the things that she used to love. Ella had a boyfriend, but he broke up with her. Since the breakup, Ella has been sleeping a lot and eating little. She feels she might be better off dead. Her parents are very concerned at the changes in Ella's behaviors, so they take her to see her pediatrician, who writes a prescription for an SSRI, which is an antidepressant. Her parents are torn. They want to help Ella, but they feel uneasy about the treatment. These are very common stories. And as I said, there are many more, but for the sake of time, wanted to just share some stories to think about. I want you to know some facts so that you understand how incredibly prevalent mental health disorders are. In the United States, 1 in 5 adults are experiencing mental illness each year. 1 in 20 U.S. adults experience serious mental illness each year. And we'll get into the differences in just a little bit. 1 in 6 U.S. youth, age 6 to 17, experience a mental health disorder each year. 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by the age of 14 and 75 by the age of 24. This is what brings it home to parents so much, because truly this is happening at a point in time where our children are just beginning to start life, and it is devastating. So we're going to talk about the differences in mental illness and just basically the way that they're categorized. There is any mental illness, AMI, and we'll kind of refer to them as AMI and SMI, is defined as a mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder. AMI can vary in impact, ranging from no impairment to mild or moderate, and even severe impairment. So these are individuals with very serious mental illness, and we're going to go into that below. Serious mental illness is defined as a mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder resulting in serious functional impairment, which substantially interferes with or limits one or more major life activities. The burden of mental illness is particularly concentrated among those who experience disability due to SMI or serious mental illness. And this is a serious concern because what we're seeing with the serious mental illness and the rate at which it has increased over the years is that we're seeing young people who basically are disabled before their life really takes off, and that's quite sad. In AMI in 2022, so just a few years back, there were an estimate 59.3 million adults aged 18 or older in the United States with AMI. And this number represented 23.1% of all US adults. Now, I do appreciate that there are some of you who are not in the US. I did use US statistics, but I can imagine that for a lot of the major developed countries, it's probably going to be the same. But please do look into your local stats to see what that might be for where you are in your neck of the woods. But 23.1% of all US adults, of course, these are over 18. These are young adults. As we said, 75% of all mental illness develops by this time. So quite significant amount of our population. We're talking about nearly a quarter of our population is being affected by this. And young adults, 18 to 25, they have the highest prevalence of AMI. So just consider that. The observed prevalence of AMI also appears to be higher in females. This is interesting. Now, what I will say is we don't really know if this is really just an observable thing, meaning are women reaching out and getting treatment or at least getting diagnosed more often than men? Or is it truly something that is affecting women more often? So just something to think about. SMI is serious mental illness. In 2022, there were an estimated 15.4 million adults aged 18 or older in the United States with SMI. Now, remember, this is where disabilities start to poke up. So this is serious. And the number represents 6% of all US adults. Considering the impact that this type of mental illness has, that is actually quite devastating. This is not just affecting, obviously, the person itself, because as we know, we do not live in an island or on an island, but this is something that is affecting families and communities everywhere. Young adults aged 18 to 25 years had the highest prevalence of SMI, very much like the AMI. And then, surprise, surprise, the observed prevalence of SMI was higher among females. So we're going to get into the causes. Now, I will just begin by saying that this is what you're going to see that's out there. I'm going to share some of the things with you that if you happen to have a child or a loved one or a family member or friend who is struggling with any of this, this is what they are being told that are the causes, or this is what the industry and I'm going to call it the industry, is teaching, and this is what is suggested. Genetics, of course, we've heard that one for everything, just, blame genetics. Environmental exposures like prenatal drugs, alcohol, and chemical imbalances. This is one that has been just pushed up and down and all around. Now, I want to say that I am not suggesting that I'm not suggesting that these things are not in some way influencing mental illness, but I do not think that they are the driving cause. And chemical imbalances, actually, we'll get to that a little bit, but there is a really novel way of looking at it now from some psychiatrists who are actually coming out and debunking this very old, what I would consider a myth, the chemical imbalance myth. It is exciting to see that, by the way, because there are psychiatrists who are kind of waking up and finding that their field is failing people, as many medical fields are, but in particular, this field has been riddled with a lot of problems. So we'll talk about the risk factors, meaning if you find yourself to be in this particular category or categories below, or someone you love, in theory, this is considered a risk factor. Stress, anyone has some of that? Brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries to be exact, although you can have chemical brain injuries. But traumatic brain injuries is the one that's really stressed here. And, that could be a fall or car accident. And traumatic events, right? So assault, combat. And as we have gone into this before, not myself, but Dr. Sandoval and so many others, that the way that we perceive and relate to our traumatic event definitely is what is the problem. And then the history of childhood abuse or neglect, which, yeah, that is, again, same issue. How are we relating to that history? Lack of healthy, meaningful relationships. Well, we were created to take from God and give to others, and that does require relationships. So I want to talk about the spiritual, because this is something that has often been brought up. And as a mother of someone who has struggled with mental health issues, this is definitely something that I went very deep to try and find out more about. And it cannot be ignored that the spiritual has a huge part to do with our mental health. So yeah, demonic involvement in some of the mental health issues. That is a very loaded topic. All I will say is that I believe that we have an enemy, and that definitely this is a war. And I believe that there are influences, and that we can open ourselves up by taking or creating ideas in our mind that we are independent, but we're really not. So we're going to take from polluted sources, and those sources could influence in this path. But I won't spend too much time on this. So what is the real cause? And if you have been listening to and learning about the law of life, you are going to guess already, and that's dysfunction. And that's That's the cause. And what is the dysfunction? And I'm going to borrow from uh, Sandoval here. And it's just living, trying to live outside of the fundamental law, which is to take, to give, forgetting that we're channels, and living in a way that is outside of understanding that we are channels and we have to take from an entrance and give out of an exit and take, give, and that cause and effect are opposite of each other and that they can't be interchanged. So a lot of times the symptoms, the problems are called a cause. And for example, I'll give the example of genetics. Well, that really can't be the cause because of so many reasons. But a misunderstanding and a misapplication of the way that we were meant to function leads to dysfunction. And we'll talk a little bit more about how exactly this might apply, especially in our children. I love this verse, Isaiah 49:15. Can a woman forget her suckling child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? God is asking this question, and then he answers it himself because he knows the answer. He's just trying to draw us to think. And he answers, yea, they may forget, yet will I not forget thee. Here is a really beautiful example of how God recognizes that there is a very special, unique relationship between a mother and her child. It is like no other relationship, and God here is using it to as an example of that closeness and that bond. It is spiritual and also physical because forgetting is a process, right? It's not something that your hand forgets or your foot forgets. This is happening in the mind. So it's a spiritual thing. And suckling, a child suckling, that's a physical thing, right? Where the child is nursing from their mother, a very physical thing, also tied in with the spiritual. Can't separate the two, but and then the other physical thing is where it's mentioning the son of her womb. It's mentioning prenatal, the prenatal time, the prenatal period. And then the Lord acknowledges something else that that parenting relationship, yeah, it might fail, and guess what? It will. That parenting relationship is fail you because your parent is a human. Sorry if you, like myself, have wasted years expecting for your parent to be anything but human and fallible. I am sorry. And I definitely, I hope that we can learn. So it does go wrong. Something goes wrong. And what is it? Well, we started out as little embryos, right? Clumps of cells, they call it. Well, we begin as cells, we begin as masses of cells. We multiply and we develop organs and we develop systems. And through those systems, we begin to get ready to live outside of our mother's body. But until that happens, we cannot. We are completely and absolutely dependent. And this is something that we'll see throughout is that dependency. It is definitely it relates to our development. So if you have a 15-week-old fetus, it will not survive outside of their mother's body. It is impossible. It just has not developed the ability to exist outside of the dependency, the connection that that child has developed. It's a spiritual connection, it's a physical connection. There is a placenta, there's a cord, and that child will develop um, throughout. And somewhere along the line, there comes a point where the child can live, even if they're born before term, meaning 40 weeks, they are still able to survive. There comes a point where their body will develop to that point. And then they come out and they are disconnected. We clamp, we cut the cord. Yay, you're disconnected from your mom, but now you connect in another way, and that is through nursing, feeding, and as we heard, that God brought up. Now, I grant that some mothers are unable or may not desire to nurse their baby, and that is true. But that baby, when they're born, if someone does not bring food to it and feed them, they will die because they are dependent. Although they may have the body systems to digest for themselves now and to be able to breathe for themselves, so on and so forth, they are not able to go get the food or even put it to their mouth. So here comes mother or father, and they feed the baby. And that baby is very helpless, very helpless. And just a thought. I mean, it warms my heart and really touches my heart to know that Jesus, the King of Kings, voluntarily placed himself in such a position. None of us remember this time, but you may have seen a baby or two, and you know they are helpless and they are very dependent. And here's a little child, and now they can walk, and they might even be able to go to the pantry and grab some crackers if they get hungry. But they're still very dependent on their parents, and that is just as this should be. And then we get to the teenager stage. Ooh, everybody loves that stage. But by this stage, there is something that's happening. That child is beginning to really want to push back and start that separation process. Um, Parents may have been the coolest people on the planet before, but now not so much. And it's just really interesting to see. It can come with a lot of um, push and shove, but it is all part of this child that began as some cells beginning their process of separation, which is so important. But guess what? Teenagers, as much as they believe that they are ready to conquer the world and don't need their parents for anything, especially since they're so much smarter than us parents, well, these teenagers are still dependent because they can't pay their bills, they can't buy their food. They may be able to cook some things, if you train them right and teach them some good skills, yes, they should be able to prepare a meal for themselves, but they don't have the money to buy the food and they can't pay for their lifestyle. So, but then they start, right? The separation process. And that this is something fabulous. You go to college, you get an education, or maybe you choose a different route, which is great. You might choose to enter the workforce in a different way, learn a trade, whatever it may be. And at the end, you are working a job and you're making your own money. And hopefully, you have completed the process of separation. Congratulations, but it goes wrong. It goes wrong because, well, process of separation is not just to say goodbye to our parents. It's deeper than that. And unless you understand the way things function and unless you're really applying that, you're not really truly separating yourself from your parents. Okay, dependency is relative to development. We talked about that. Yeah. With different stages of development, there will be different levels of dependency. And at the beginning, the dependency is very high. It's complete, actually. But we hope that they can transition and complete that separation process. With proper development, you see a gradual replacement of the mother or the parent with God. That is the correct separation process. But when this development is interrupted, stunted, or impeded with, which happens all the time, by the way, dysfunction occurs. Because, as we talked about, none of our parents have been anything but humans that have had their own dysfunctional beginnings and are sorting it out themselves. And it's not the child's fault that they're dysfunctional. And it's not the parents' fault that they're dysfunctional. It's not really a fault problem. It's just the way that things work. It's the way that things function. What can we get in the way? What can get in the way of proper development? So we're going to talk about this because this is the beginning of understanding how the mental illness begins to take shape. So here we have this a really cute baby and they're eating. And here next to that, we have a little child and looks like they're growing. You're measuring them up against the wall. I don't know how many of you do that. We love to do that. We have a wall. And children have basic needs or requirements in order to complete their development, right? So, in order for the child to grow, the child has to get enough food and the right kind of food. So, this is a very basic thing. And our children have needs. They have spiritual needs, right? They need stability, predictability, understanding, acceptance, belonging, validation, attention, truth, justice. They need to feel safe. And they need positive role models. They need opportunities to learn, play, and explore. I'd like to go into some of these. Maybe we don't have time to go into all of these, but with the spiritual, starting with stability and predictability, I'll tell you what. In my case, I didn't have these things. There was a lot of instability in my life and very little predictability when I was growing up. And that might be your case, and it may be the case of your children. It was the case for my children too. Stability, well, children like to have a mother and a father. They like to have a mother and a father that are stable, that love each other, and that are predictable. They don't have to wonder if dad is coming home or if he's going to stay out drinking or if mom is doing that. This is really very important. And it goes even deeper than that. Stability can be regular bedtime routines. It can be things like regularity with meals. And these are things that definitely are mentioned, in books like Child Guidance. And they are so important for the mental health of our children. Another thing to consider is positive role models. If your child is surrounded by people who are um, fairly not great role models, that's not good for them. They don't yet understand function. They don't understand how to connect themselves with God. They're going to connect to those around them. So, surrounding our children with positive role models, that's important. And who is the best role model of all? Of course, that's Jesus. So, teaching our children about Jesus is so important. And then, of course, opportunities to learn and play and that is so underrated. Oftentimes, children are put into a lot of very rigid institutional type of environments where they're not really given that, and that can have an impact on your mental health. And then of course we have the physical needs, and we know what those are, right? And those needs are going to obviously vary from age to age, meaning, um, I'm sorry, I just went back. I hope as long as your child has developed physically at a normal rate, you would hope that you're not helping your 17-year-old with a toileting issue, right? You hope. Obviously, there are exceptions to that because development is not the same for every child, and there are issues with um, developmental delays or syndromes or even accidents. So this is in no way trying to say that if there is a child that has that need, obviously, then that need should be met no matter what age they are in. And healthcare is there because, yes, if your kid breaks their leg, you need to meet that need. They need some sort of resolution to that. And if they are not feeling well, you need to address that. How you choose to address that, I am not going to get into. Okay. So when the child's needs are unmet, the child must react, right? Now, is everyone going to have all of their needs, or is that a reasonable expectation to meet their needs perfectly all of the time? I would probably say that somewhere along the line, there is going to be a little break. There's going to be something that comes up, even with the most conscious, loving parents. So this is not a judgment on anyone's parenting or anything that we have passed. I am, in that sense, chief of sinners with that because I have made many mistakes. So there's no judgment here. So the child will attempt to have its needs met in any available way, even if the replacement for that need is not compatible to meet the need, and even if the replacement is toxic and damaging, as long as it appears to be a gain to the child. So if that child is feeling like that there's needs that aren't met, there's no other choice for the child but to try and have that need met. Um, this is so important for us to consider because we often will put our children down for behaviors that are not great. So coping mechanisms and habits are developed throughout the child's development because of this. That might be that they're sucking their thumb past a reasonable age, that they are biting their fingernails, that they're fidgeting. There are so many different behaviors and different ways that people find to cope with the issue of not having needs met. And the very spirit of the child is developing under duress and without the proper needs provided. Now, again, this is not a judgment at all. This is just the way that things tend to happen. To the child, the parent fills the placeholder for God until the child is able to cognitively build the framework of God as the provider for all of their needs. Is normal. And this is the way it is. The child has no way to have a concept of who God is. The child has no way to directly connect to God at this point. And this is, I believe it's, and I think it may pop up. Let's see. Yep, MS 67. 1903. Parents stand in the place of God toward their little ones. As they desire God to be kind to them, so they are to be kind to their children. Now, what could be kinder than trying to meet their needs, correct? And we saw they have many needs. And I want to mention this. It is not possible for us to meet their needs truly outside of connecting with God and channeling those needs to our children. Um, that's just the truth. So if you find yourself struggling to meet whatever needs to your children, or if you have, it's good for us to understand that we can feel quite overwhelmed, and that is because we are trying to be creators. We're trying to be the ones that provide these needs. We are just channels. That is the only thing that we are designed for. And it is the only thing that we can do for our children. So just remember, we are the placeholders for God, and that we stand in place of God toward our little ones. They are so connected to us. So I want to talk about some common treatments for mental illness. Again, this does not mean that I am advocating for this or that. I'm sharing um what is out there. So we have a drug-centered model that really is the the driver in the industry. A drug-centered model looks like psychotherapy, yeah, some of that. Cognitive behavioral therapy. Yeah. Now, I will share this with you that when they do go to institutions, psychiatric holding facilities, or psychiatric hospitals, psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy are actually like the it. Many of these places don't really even offer some of these things. There's eye movement, desensitization and processing. Please forgive me, I butchered that. And that has to do with some eye movements that you do, and it's supposed to help with trauma. Um, Again, I'm not suggesting any of these things. I'm simply saying that these are some of the things that are used, and it is all part of the drug-centered model. There are anxiolytics, which are anti-anxiety drugs. There are going to be your antidepressants, the SSRIs, the mood stabilizers like lithium, the antipsychotics like Abilify, and they're masking symptoms. So none of these therapies are meant to treat and cure. In fact, there is a psychiatrist. Her name is Dr. Joanna Moncrief, and she has come out and just really taken on the industry, because the industry has become very well, they don't like her very much. And she wrote a book called Chemically Imbalanced, and she tackles all of the evidence that much of the drug model is flawed, and that chemical imbalances are a myth. So she compares the drug model as just like having a drink of alcohol is drowning our sorrows. Drugs only superimpose over symptoms. They do not target the root cause, and they offer no cures. Okay, I'm saying that, but we're going to go into a little bit deep in a little bit. Again, just like drinking alcohol drowns your sorrows, you may feel happy while you're drinking, but it doesn't take away your issues. And just like alcohol, it has, it's got its side effects. So there are other approaches, and people are generally, many of them are pretty sick with the drug approaches. So, there are a lot of people who are coming out and trying different things to see if it'll help. There's yoga, right? Lots of people love that. Again, this is not a recommendation. I'm just telling you what you're going to hear about. And if you dig a little deeper, you're going to find that this is what you're going to run into. And your person whom you love and is suffering with mental illness, these are going to be things that are going to be recommended to them. Mindfulness and meditation, aromatherapy, acupuncture, massage therapy, art and music, support groups, keto diets. I find the support groups actually interesting because the support groups are literally a group of individuals who are all suffering from mental illness, and they'll sit around and talk about how they're suffering from mental illness. I honestly do not see that as being necessarily very helpful. Again, there are going to be people who will argue up and down and all around that I am wrong for saying that, but that's just my 2 cents. Keto diets, there are many people who are going from a standard American diet to a keto diet, and they are seeing what they call amazing results. People are getting off of medications. Keto diets are extremely restrictive, not very healthy, but I will say that maybe if you compare it to a very processed food diet, it may be a little better. I don't know. People seem to find some relief. Transmagnetic stimulation, or TMS, that is another approach that is supposed to be cutting edge, and that is sometimes used for depression that is not responding at all to any medications. So what can help? Again, not medical advice. Well, I will mention some things that I saw in the time that I was helping my child recover. And again, just want to share this, that the process of recovery is it's lengthy. I want to put that out there. It's not a snap your fingers, here we go, everything's going to be fine. This is something that didn't get to this point overnight, and it not going to get better overnight the way you think or would like it to. But these are some of the things that helped, and we saw in our family that this was helpful to my child. New Start. Oh, surprise. Yeah, that was very helpful. And if you don't know what New Start is, it's an acronym for nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine. I always get the 2 T's. I know one is temperance, and the other one is oh dear, my brain is leaving me. But basically, I'll remember temperance and air and rest, and then the other one, oh my, well, my brain is not.
Trust.
Trust. That's right. That's the most important one. Trust in God. Yeah, there are a few acronyms that give you the same thing. I actually use the birthing one that Patty Barnes uses, because the work I do is mainly related to midwifery. But yes, trust in God. Absolutely. Psychiatric medications. I'm sorry to share this with you, but yes, they are needed sometimes. They are not going to fix your problem, but there's no way that you're going to get through some of these cases to the person without using them outside of a miracle. Of course, God is able. I'm not saying I'm not taking that outside of God's abilities, but sometimes I have found that medications are necessary. because you cannot reason with a person who is absolutely delusional and absolutely psychotic. It's they're safe, nor is it productive. There's no way to even begin to get them on the path of recovery. So yes, I am sorry to say psychiatric medications are probably needed sometimes. When I say sometimes, I'm probably talking more about this severe mental illness, um, talking about things like maybe bipolar disorder. I'm talking about schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, the severe mental health issues where um, it's not a matter of trying to just talk to the person. There's just no way. If you have ever been around a person who's psychotic, you will understand what I am saying. If you haven't, we are talking with people that are completely disconnected with reality. There's no way to have a conversation with them. When it comes to depression and anxiety, I actually think that there are so many other places to start rather than medications. And I'm not the only one. And there are even there's a growing consensus even amongst psychiatrists who are really speaking out against medicating people for depression and anxiety as the first line treatment. There is a doctor, his name is Dr. Joseph uh, Whitdoring, and very interesting story. He got sick of working in the hospital, saw he couldn't help anyone, so he says, I'm going to go into psychiatric drug research so I can help people that way. And then he got into that, and what he saw just made him so sick to his stomach. How the drug manufacturers they were sitting on so much information where this is not a good place to start medications for depression and anxiety. So he left his $700,000 job with the drug research, and he actually made it his life's goal to help people get off of these medications. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, of course, there's nature, and nature is amazing. We know that it's just the most beautiful thing to be able um, to just go outside and to enjoy the sunshine and the fresh air. This is absolutely, yes, this helps. Farm garden work. So my kiddo, yeah, this was a blessing. This was something, honestly, this was very wonderful and so helpful. Equestrian therapy. So equestrian therapy is actually a thing, working with horses. If you don't have horses around you, try another animal, but somehow it is helpful. And in the case with my child, the farm, the horses, yes, and yes, that was great. That was such a blessing. We actually had my child working at a farm, volunteering for a while on a daily basis, and it made a world of difference. Purpose and meaning. Everyone needs that. And if your person is sitting in a room and they don't have purpose or meaning to their life, they will not recover. They will not remember that it is so critical that we take to give, and that giving part is so important. Intermittent fasting, yes. Intermittent fasting, it does seem to help, and there is some research out there that is showing that. And perhaps with the keto diets, it somehow kind of mimics that, but intermittent fasting is a really good thing. And micro tapering off of meds under medical supervision. Micro tapering off of meds is a very it's a very safe way to taper off medications. I mean, meaning getting off some of the medications maybe that your person had to get on to get through to them, but you want to help them to slowly taper off some medications. This is critical. And or maybe your person has been on, an antidepressant for a couple years. They start them young. So could have been a couple years that their brain has become dependent on this interference. And it you cannot, please do not just stop medications cold turkey, or think that you can just get off of them in a short span of time. That is not wise. It is very important that you find a medical professional who can help you with the process of micro means small, tapering. And herbs. Yeah, there are certain herbs that are very good. They do help to support and the body in an effort to heal the nervous system. Sure, herbs can be very helpful. Supplementing for deficiencies. Yes, some people do have deficiencies, and yes, some of those deficiencies can they can play into the mental health issues. So, yeah, supplementing for deficiencies. Yep. Avoiding further toxic insults. This is very important. So, if your person, if they are smoking cannabis, especially these young people, this is a huge thing where young people are getting basically chemical traumatic brain injuries from cannabis. If your person has been smoking cannabis or whatever other alcohol, substance, toxic insults to their brain, that needs to stop. How that stops, please be very wise about that. If you have a person who's using these substances, sometimes they are self-medicating, like the doctor mentioned that, alcohol, and it numbs you. So yeah, it drowns your sorrows. So there are people who have mental illnesses and they are self-medicating with these substances. So just be aware that if you come off these medications, you can have big reactions. So if you're aware of that, you can kind of prepare for that and not be taken off guard. And I say that because you may have other children in the home, right? And it may become a safety issue. So just a safety issue in the sense of, yes, and physical, maybe it could be, that person gets aggressive, but also may become a danger to themselves, but also, the other children in the home, they can be greatly impacted by the other older child who is who's suffering from this problem. So what made the biggest difference in our case? Again, not medical advice, but a lot of people ask me, how was it that you were able to help your child? Because the difference from start to, and I won't say finish, but to today for my child is night and day, to the point that their psychiatric provider literally stopped me and it's like, okay, I need to know, what are you doing? I need to know because I need to take notes. What are you doing? And then, they've said, you don't understand. Your son's case is a miracle case. This doesn't happen. So the people who have seen this, have heard of this, they'll reach out to me. They want to know what made the biggest difference. I just shot out a lot at you. And if you want to reach out to me about the details on supplements and herbs, yes, I can help with those things. Those are helps, but they're not the biggest thing. What made the biggest difference was prayer, and more prayer. Fasting. Yes. fasting and just coming to the Lord and asking him to guide me, to just please make a clear path for me. There are so many things to navigate in this situation. I was not only navigating my child and their recovery and their needs, but I had other children in the home. And I had at the time my mother who was she was actually in hospice. So I was caring for her. So I needed Jesus so much. You have no idea. So prayer, fasting, standing in the gap. So yes, I understood that at that point my child was incapacitated, and there was not a whole lot that they could do as far as reaching out to God, at least not on the outside, because they were so overly medicated. Learning and applying the law of life. This was so critical. I remember talking to Dr. Mark, and I remember talking to Dr. Clydia Riss, and I remember something she said to me, and I may have said this in the past, but when I described the situation my son was in and how he just how it was so bad, all the symptoms. Now she said, "Oh wow, that is a terrible loss." And then she followed that up right away with "for God." And it brought me really quickly into perspective over who was experiencing the loss here. And it really helped. Learning to trust God with the outcome. Oh yeah, because let me tell you, my child was facing a really ugly looking future. And it was as if he'd gone down a road that I had never heard of anyone coming back from. And what I was being told was just, yeah, you don't expect them to come back. But learning to trust God with the outcome. Learning more about God's love and his relationship to us, his children. Just like diving into God's love and taking hold of it and making it your own, and just don't let go. And letting go of trying to control my child. This was huge because here was my child. And yes, again, going back to development and dependency in the case of my child at that particular point, because of the way they were at that particular time, we kind of went backwards by many, many years, and learning that I needed to help them to detach from me and to attach to God. And that process requires letting go of trying to control that child. Supporting a safe separation from myself for my child. That this was critical. And it was not easy. And believe it or not, it was I who got in the way the most of this. I'll give you an example. They were doing, increasingly better, gaining more independence. When I say independence, I'm saying pulling away from needing me to do for them. And it came to the point where, okay, they want to drive. They have a car. They have a driver's license. It's legal for them to drive. So, oh boy, let me tell you, I was just bombarded by family members and all sorts of comments of, how could you let them drive? Oh no. And let me tell you, there was, after making sure that it was a safe situation, as far as like, is it legal? Is there some impairment that will, that we should be, after I made sure that that was not the case, I had to let go, and I had to let my child separate and become not attached to me. And that was a very big challenge. And allowing consequences for my child to happen. Oh, this was so hard. We see our babies and they're hurting, and our response, our selfish response, is going to be to try and not let that happen, but it is the consequences that help them to learn for themselves. And channeling the love of God to my child. They needed to experience God's love, and sometimes our children are not capable of reaching. They're so weak. They have been just so pushed down by Satan and all of this, that the only way that they can experience the love of God, and this is not just our children, it could be anyone. It's the homeless man on the street that's talking to himself. You may be that channel that can take Jesus right to them. And this made a great difference. Loving my ex-spouse, yes. That was Dr. Horse. When I talked to him about my situation, I said, hey, anything else I could do? He's like, yes, you need to love your ex-husband, and you need to let your child see how much you love their father. And so I began to try and incorporate that in as many conversations as I could. I really love your dad. And of course, it couldn't be a lie. So I had to do my own work with Jesus for that to happen, right? Right. So, but just letting my child know, because that was one of the problems originally, was that he grew up not seeing love between his father and I. So correcting that, if you have the opportunity to correct something, obviously you should if you can. And modeling love to my child. So just showing how to love others and showing patience and kindness and grace to others. Huge difference. So much more that I could share with you, but this right here that I just shared with you, this was where the biggest difference came from. And as you see, you can look at all the things here, and you see the long list. You will notice that none of those things included giving my son a pill or a herb, or they were all about me and how I related to him. And actually, that is the biggest difference. That is the biggest difference. It's the work that we have to do within ourselves in order to be able to be channels of love and healing to our children when they are just at a point that they need us to stand in the gap for them. I wanted to finish off kind of where I started, and where I told you I was having my devotional walk and listening to Desire of Ages, chapter 47. And I want to share this with you because it is so beautiful. The disciples appeared troubled. A circumstance had just occurred that had caused them bitter disappointment and humiliation. While they were waiting at the foot of the mountain, a father had brought to them his son to be delivered from a dumb spirit that tormented him. Authority over unclean spirits to cast them out had been conferred on the disciples when Jesus sent out the 12 to preach through Galilee. As they went forth strong in faith, the evil spirits had obeyed their word. Now, in the name of Christ, they commanded the torturing spirit to leave his victim, but the demon only mocked them by a fresh display of his power. The disciples, unable to account for their defeat, felt that they were bringing dishonor upon themselves and their master. As if he had been witnessing all that had occurred, because he wasn't with them for that, the Savior came to the scene of conflict, and fixing his gaze upon the scribes, inquired, "What question ye with them?" But the voices so bold and defiant before were now silent. A hush had fallen upon the entire company. Now the afflicted father made his way through the crowd and falling at the feet of Jesus, poured out the story of his trouble and disappointment. By the way, just reading this, I can tell you how touched I am because I have been this father. Master, he said, I have brought unto thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit, and wheresoever he taketh him, he teareth him. And I spake to thy disciples that they should cast him out, and they could not. I want to just quickly address this. I am not suggesting that mental illness is, I don't want to get into the rabbit hole of the demonic aspect, but I will only say that it is a spiritual problem. And this father was bringing his child to Jesus for a spiritual problem. So you can plug yourself right into the story if your child has a spiritual problem too. Jesus looked about him upon the awe-stricken multitude, caviling scribes, the perplexed disciples. He read the unbelief in every heart, and in a voice filled with sorrow, he exclaimed, O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Then he bade the distressed father, bring thy son hither. The boy was brought, and as the Savior's eyes fell upon him, the evil spirit cast him to the ground in convulsions of agony. He lay wallowing and foaming, rending the air with unearthly shrieks. I'm sorry. Again, the Prince of Life and the Prince of the powers of darkness had met on the field of battle. Christ, in fulfillment of his mission to preach deliverance to the captives, to set at liberty them that are bruised. Satan seeking to hold his victim under his control. Angels of light and the host of evil angels unseen were pressing near to behold the conflict. For a moment, Jesus permitted the evil spirit to display his power, that the beholders might comprehend the deliverance about to be wrought. The multitude looked on with bated breath. The Father, in an agony of hope and fear, Jesus asked, how long is it ago since this came unto him? The Father told the story of long years of suffering. And then, as if he could endure no more, exclaimed, if thou canst do anything, have compassion on us and help us. If thou canst. Even now the Father questioned the power of Christ. Jesus answers, if thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. There is no lack of power on the part of Christ. The healing of the Son depends upon the Father's faith. With a burst of tears, realizing his own weakness, the Father cast himself upon Christ's mercy with the cry, Lord, I believe. Help thou mine unbelief. Jesus turns to the suffering one and says, thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him and enter no more into him. There's a cry, an agonized struggle. The demon in passing seems about to rend the life from his victim. Then the boy lies motionless and apparently lifeless. The multitude whisper, he is dead. But Jesus takes him by the hand and lifting him up, presents him in perfect soundness of mind and body to his father. Father and son praise the name of their deliverer. This story is so relevant to this topic. You see, it was the father's unbelief that was the impediment of the child's relief and healing. It was not the power of Christ being limited. It was not Christ's desire to heal him. And oftentimes, I feel as parents, we miss this very much. And I'm not saying that if you pray hard enough and you fast long enough and you do all the right things, that God is going to give you your reward, your just reward, and your child is going to be all right. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it is our relationship with the Lord, or a lack thereof, that prevents us from being channels of light to our children that are dying in darkness right now. And while there are many things that might be helpful, they don't reach the cause. And while the child remains an independent person and they have their own sphere of action, and you cannot go in and you cannot go into the child and do anything in them, you can certainly bring the light of Christ to them. And let me tell you what, the best case scenario for your child or your loved one or the person you know who is suffering, the family, the best case scenario is going to always be when the parents can be a light. Get out of the way. Get out of God's way and let God do the recovery that he has to do with your child. It's going to be painful. It's going to be ugly. There are going to be a lot of tears and there's going to be a lot of sorrow, but get out of the way. Let God do what he needs to do. Trust God with the process and the outcome. Cooperate with him and shine like a beautiful light for your children. In order to do that, we have to understand the proper function. We have to understand what it is that it means to really stop fixing the problem ourselves, but instead just being a channel. Look, guys, that's all that you can be. As parents, we try and be more than that. You can't be anything else. Just be a channel. Channel that light. I'm here to tell you from a personal experience that it's not just words. This is where the solution lies as far as we are concerned. That child still has the work to do within themselves. That child is still an individual. We can't fix our children, but we can cooperate with Jesus and he can do marvelous things. I have seen it. And I know that what Jesus said is true. If we will believe, I invite you to just, by God's grace, believe that God is able, that you don't have to, that you can just let Jesus do it through, just use you as a channel. And with that, I think we will open up, I guess, if anyone has any comments or any questions. I'm not sure. I think the chat has some things, but I don't know how to operate this. I don't know if you
That's
could do
okay. Yeah, I can forward chats along and that kind of stuff to you.
Okay.
Uh, but if you want to pray out this section and then we'll do
Yeah.
the Q&A.
Okay. Perfect. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you again for the opportunity to discuss this very important topic that's affecting so many families. I want to thank you because you are still the same one that desires to heal and that heal that you can. You're still the same one that has a heart for fathers and mothers, and that you have a good plan for our children. Please help us, dear Lord. Help us to come to you and to surrender ourselves to you and the situations to you so that we can take from you and give so that we can be channels of light in this dark world. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.